The Riverside Country Club's grand ballrooms sparkled with the kind of understated elegance that only decades of catering to old money could achieve. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over perfectly appointed tables, while oil paintings of distinguished club founders watched over the evening's festivities with quiet approval. Dad's 70th milestone birthday celebration had drawn over 100 guests, business associates, longtime friends and family members, all gathered to honor the man who'd spent 4 decades building his reputation as one of the city's most respected attorneys. I sat at the family table in my simple black dress from Target, quietly observing the carefully choreographed performance of wealth and social status unfolding around me. Dad held court in his custom-tailored tuxedo, accepting congratulations and well wishes with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. Mom glided between tables in her designer gown, ensuring that every guest felt properly welcomed and impressed by the evening's elegance. My brother William commanded attention near the bar, regaling anyone who'd listen with stories from his latest corporate merger, while my sister Catherine sparkled beside her surgeon husband, both of them radiating the confidence that came from never having worried about money. The guest list included judges, business leaders and political figures, exactly the kind of influential crowd that Dad had cultivated throughout his successful legal career. The evening had progressed beautifully through cocktails and dinner, with multiple toasts celebrating Dad's professional achievements and his pillar of the community reputation. But as the wine flowed and conversations became more animated, I found myself becoming the evening's unwilling entertainment. Elizabeth, Mom's voice cut through the dinner conversation as dessert was being served. Why don't you tell everyone about your little job? The entire family table turned their attention to me with barely concealed anticipation. This was Mom's favorite party performance, publicly discussing my career choices as a way to highlight how much more successful everyone else's children had become. I work at the hospital, I said simply, taking a small bite of the elaborate chocolate dessert. She's a janitor, Mom announced to the table with obvious disappointment. 35 years old, law degree from Stanford, and she mops floors at General Hospital. The table made polite sounds of sympathy mixed with barely concealed amusement. Everyone knew families had their disappointments, but few were discussed quite so openly at milestone birthday celebrations. It's actually environmental services coordination, I corrected gently. Same thing, William interjected with brotherly condescension. Cleaning up other people's messes for minimum wage while the rest of us built actual careers. Judge Morrison, Dad's longtime friend, leaned forward with diplomatic interest. Environmental services is important work, Elizabeth. Hospitals couldn't function without proper sanitation. That's very kind, Mom said with theatrical sadness, but let's be honest about what it really is. While William runs a successful law practice and Catherine married a prominent surgeon, Elizabeth chose to waste her education cleaning bathrooms. The laughter that followed was uncomfortable but persistent. The worst part, Dad added, his voice carrying to nearby tables, is that we invested a fortune in her education. Stanford Law School, top of her class, law review, she had every opportunity to build a meaningful career. Instead, Catherine said with sisterly concern, she threw it all away to become hospital cleaning staff. It's honestly embarrassing when people ask what our daughter does for a living. I continued eating my dessert while they discussed my various shortcomings with the clinical detachment of people analyzing a particularly disappointing investment. No ambition, no understanding of professional success, no grasp of what her expensive education was supposed to accomplish. You know what the real tragedy is? Mom's voice was getting louder as she warmed to her favorite theme. Elizabeth could have been anything. Corporate lawyer, judge, district attorney. She had the grades, the connections, the family support. But some people just don't have the drive to succeed. Mrs. Patterson, wife of the hospital board chairman, tried to offer diplomatic support. Well, someone has to do those jobs. Not everyone can be a lawyer. But she's not just anyone, Mom replied with obvious frustration. She's our daughter. She was supposed to represent this family's values, our commitment to excellence, our understanding of what success looks like. The conversation continued along these familiar lines as the evening's program began. Dad was presented with various honors recognizing his decades of legal service and community involvement. Local dignitaries offered remarks about his contributions to charitable causes and civic organizations. the usual celebration of a life well lived among the city's elite. Speaking of community service, the evening's master of ceremonies announced from the podium, "Tonight we have the honor of recognizing some very special philanthropic achievements that connect directly to our guest of honor's family." The room quieted as people turned their attention to the stage. "As many of you know," the speaker continued, "General Hospital has been undergoing a major expansion to serve our growing community's healthcare needs." Polite applause rippled through the ballroom. "Tonight, we're thrilled to announce the completion of a project that will transform pediatric care in our region, the new Elizabeth Carter Children's Wing." My parents stopped mid-conversation and stared at the speaker with obvious confusion. "The Elizabeth Carter Children's Wing," he repeated, "represents a $25 million donation that has created the most advanced pediatric facility within 200 miles. The silence at our family table was profound. "Elizabeth Carter?" Mom whispered, her voice barely audible. "This extraordinary gift," the speaker continued, "has funded not just the construction of a world-class children's hospital wing, but also the latest medical equipment, specialized treatment rooms, and a comprehensive family support center." Dad's wine glass was frozen halfway to his lips, his face pale beneath his carefully maintained tan. "The Carter Foundation's generosity extends far beyond this single project," the speaker explained. "Over the past 8 years, their contributions to healthcare initiatives have totaled over $60 million, making them one of our region's most impactful philanthropic organizations." $60 million. The number seemed to echo in the sudden silence at our table. "We're honored tonight," the speaker said, his voice carrying clearly across the stunned ballroom, "to have the Carter Foundation's founder here with us, celebrating with her family." He gestured directly toward me. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Elizabeth Carter for her extraordinary commitment to children's health care." The applause that erupted was thunderous, but I could barely hear it over the sound of my mother choking on her wine and my father's champagne glass shattering on the marble floor. "Elizabeth Carter?" Judge Morrison said slowly, staring at me with dawning recognition. "You're the Elizabeth Carter? The Carter Foundation Elizabeth Carter?" "Yes," I said calmly, setting down my dessert spoon. "But you work at the hospital," Catherine said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do work at the hospital," I confirmed. "I've been volunteering in the children's ward for 8 years, which is how I learned about the gaps in pediatric care that needed funding." Mom found her voice, though it came out shaky. "Elizabeth, what is the Carter Foundation?" Foundation. I started it 9 years ago to address healthcare inequities I observed during my volunteer work." "Your foundation?" William repeated mechanically. "Elizabeth, where did $60 million come from?" "Carter Legal Consulting," I said simply. "The firm I built after leaving traditional legal practice." The family stared at me like I'd announced I was from another planet. "Legal consulting?" Dad managed to ask. "Specialized corporate compliance consulting for healthcare systems." Turns out my combination of legal expertise and hands-on hospital experience created a pretty unique market position. Judge Morrison leaned forward with obvious fascination. "Elizabeth, Carter Legal Consulting, that's your firm? You handle the compliance work for half the hospital systems on the West Coast." "About 60% actually. We've expanded into regulatory consulting for medical device companies and pharmaceutical research compliance." "I know your work," Dr. Patterson, Catherine's husband, said with amazement. "The compliance protocols you developed have become industry standard. Every hospital administrator I know swears by Carter Legal's guidance." Mom was staring at me with a combination of shock and what looked like nausea. "Elizabeth, how big is Carter Legal Consulting?" "Annual revenue is approximately $85 million. After operational costs and taxes, we donate roughly 40% of profits to healthcare-related causes." The number hit the table like a physical blow. $85 million? Catherine whispered. "The healthcare compliance field has grown significantly over the past decade. Hospitals need specialized legal guidance to navigate regulatory requirements, and most traditional law firms don't have the practical healthcare experience to provide effective consulting." Dad finally found his voice, though it came out hoarse. "Elizabeth, you own an $85 million consulting firm?" "I employ 127 people across 12 offices. We're opening 3 new locations next year to serve the Southeast market. Mrs. Patterson leaned across the table with obvious excitement. Elizabeth, the children's wing is incredible. I toured it last week. The Family Support Center, the specialized treatment rooms, the research facilities. It's like something you'd see at Johns Hopkins. That was the goal, I said. Children deserve the same quality of care regardless of their family's economic situation. The research facilities? William asked weakly. We're funding pediatric cancer research, childhood diabetes treatment protocols, and mental health programs for families dealing with long-term illnesses. The wing includes laboratory space for clinical trials. Judge Morrison was shaking his head with amazement. Elizabeth, I sit on the hospital board. Your foundation's impact has been extraordinary. The infant mortality rates, the pediatric cancer survival statistics, you've literally saved hundreds of children's lives. That's the point, I said. Legal consulting is just a means to an end. Healthcare philanthropy is what actually matters. The Master of Ceremonies returned to the microphone, clearly enjoying the evening's dramatic revelations. I'm pleased to announce, he said, that the Carter Foundation has committed to an additional $15 million over the next 3 years to expand mental health services for children and families. More thunderous applause filled the ballroom, but our family table remained silent except for the sound of Mom quietly crying into her napkin. 15 million more? Dad asked, his voice barely audible. The mental health component was always part of the long-term plan, I explained. Childhood illness affects entire families. We need comprehensive support systems. Catherine found her voice, though it came out cracked. Elizabeth, the things we said tonight, about you being an embarrassment. About how embarrassing it would be if the neighbors knew I was your daughter? I finished. I heard every word. The table sat in profound silence as the reality of their assumptions became clear. We didn't know, William protested weakly. You didn't know because you never asked. Every time I tried to talk about my work, someone made a joke about mopping floors. So I stopped talking about my work. But the hospital cleaning job, Mom started, is volunteer work I do every Saturday morning in the children's ward. I've been reading to pediatric patients and helping families navigate the system for 8 years. That's how I learned what kind of facility improvements were needed. Dad cleared his throat, his attorney instincts finally engaging despite the shock. Elizabeth, this is extraordinary. We should discuss family foundation opportunities, maybe some strategic partnerships with your consulting firm. I laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise everyone at the table. You want to partner with the daughter who embarrasses the family? The one you wouldn't want the neighbors to know about. Elizabeth, that was just. Mom started, then stopped, apparently unable to find words to explain away years of public humiliation. That was you showing me exactly who you are when you think it doesn't matter what you say to someone. My phone buzzed with a text from my foundation manager. Hospital dedication ceremony confirmed for next month. Governor's office confirmed attendance. The dedication ceremony is next month, I said, standing from the table. You're welcome to attend if you'd like to see what your embarrassing daughter has built. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the explosion of conversation behind me. Whispered amazement, frantic attempts to process what had just been revealed, probably mixed with calculations about how this changed their relationships with me. Judge Morrison caught up with me in the lobby. Elizabeth, I owe you an apology. I've sat at that table for years listening to your parents discuss your career choices, and I never realized that the hospital janitor they were mocking had actually funded the hospital wing they were celebrating. I suggested. Your work has saved so many children, he said with genuine emotion. The research programs, the family support services, the treatment innovations, it's been transformative. That's why I do it, I said simply. Legal consulting pays well, but healthcare philanthropy saves lives. Tomorrow, when the local news ran their story about the children's wing dedication, when my family's friends started asking about their embarrassing daughter, when they realized their assumptions about success and failure had been completely backwards, things would be different. Not because I'd finally proven myself worthy of their respect, but because they'd finally learned the cost of judging someone's value based on job titles rather than actual impact. Carter Legal Consulting had bigger expansion plans, and the Carter Foundation had more children's programs to fund. And for the first time in 8 years, I wouldn't have to explain any of it to people who had already decided I wasn't worth listening to.